So that was very nice to see. Next up, I spent the next 2 years at Ecobee, which is a smart home IoT company based out of Toronto. So I worked there for 2 years, leading several software projects, such as I built out the Android and iOS applications, the Apple Watch app, the iPad app. Then later on, moved on to working on the embedded software itself, and then doing a lot more machine learning projects. So I worked on a number of things there. So it was very fun and rewarding to be able to just like stretch myself as a PM. Most recently, I'm working out of Copper, which is based out of San Francisco in Silicon Valley, but I work remotely here in Toronto. So what I primarily do is like work with PMs from Google to be able to strengthen our partnership with them and our integration with them. So that's been a very, very fun experience. Most recently, the author of How to Product, the book that talks about how to transition into product management. And I'll be talking about that for the rest of this, like later on in this talk. So feel free to ask me about that if you have any questions. So my goals for this talk, similar to how you see in the title, I want to talk about the basics of product management, how to like impact product decisions as a product manager, how to be successful as a product manager, and how to transition into product, which is what my book mostly talks about. So this is kind of like a learning, like a lesson. So hopefully you all can gain something at the end of it. So feel free, I'll stop several times after each section for questions. So feel free to add questions in the chat or, unmute your mic and ask me questions if that's possible. And then, yeah, happy to answer any questions that you might have. So great, let's get into it. So let's start with the basics of product management. I like to really show this slide whenever I talk about product management. And honestly, what product managers do every day is we pick a real problem, we find a solution to the problem, and we ship it. So this is obviously very simplifying it, like heavily simplifying it, but essentially this is what I do for a living. I figure out what customer problems are there in the market. I'm there with my users. I try and find a solution to those problems in a number of ways, and then I ship it, and then it either solves their problem or it doesn't solve that problem. And even when it solves that problem, sometimes you can find that it's not really perfect, so you have to tweak it, and that becomes like another real problem. You find a solution. So this is like the iterative cycle that constantly happens. So this is what product managers around the world do, whether it's me or product managers at Google and Microsoft. So I just wanted to just like start with that. But a little history about product management, it kind of started as a marketing function. So it was described in the 70s as, these brand guys that were supposed to talk to clients and talk to customers to really understand what they wanted. And later on, it then moved into like an engineering function where, product managers will essentially write long specs over periods of months. They'll do a lot of their user research in the beginning. They'll write like long specs and then they'll throw it across, the wall for the engineering team to build, all for 6 months later or a year later for the engineering team to come up with something totally different from the PM intended. So it wasn't actually working. So being too focused on the customer and then being too focused on the engineer didn't really work for any party. So that's why the name came up with agile development. So a group of software engineers actually went together in a cabin in California and sort of wrote this agile manifesto on like how they would like to work. So instead of it being very, hey, I've done my part, you do your part, they wanted it to be more collaborative. So how do product managers actually collaborate with people? And it moved things like design, like from the end to actually being at a very important part of every single step in the product development lifecycle. So that's kind of like how product management involved. And then after, instead of just like marketing and engineering, it then had different elements, across the organization. So product managers needed to do more research, not just like in the beginning, but throughout the product development lifecycle. They also needed to think about design very, very early on. And whenever they had anything that was tangible, they would also go through like a design review or user testing, instead of waiting at the end for it to be able to say, hey, let's actually design this one when all the functionality is there. Also thinking about quality assurance, like, does it meet the requirements that the PM initially set? And that's something that they could check in very, very quick iterations versus like after 6 months or after 1 year when things don't match your requirements. Another thing was customer support and sales, whereby once you launch your product, being able to funnel that feedback in, or to be able to get people to use your product and learn from that process. So it moved from like a marketing function and engineering function into more of like, an organizational function. So if you think about the previous slide, they had different elements, across the organization: design, sales, customer support, and it's also a customer function. So product managers, essentially, go back and forth between what do the organization need and then what do the customers need. So essentially, product managers live and breathe to serve these two parties. So the way I like to describe product management, or what product managers do, is product managers enable organizations to deliver value to customers in however way this comes up. Like, this is what all product managers do. You're supposed to be able to enable your internal stakeholders, whether it's your dev team, your design team, your sales team, or your customer support team. And then that goal is to make sure that at the end of the day, the end customer is happy, the end customer has a product to use, the end customer's problem is solved. And then the most common way product managers do this is to be able to identify and solve problems through an iterative process. So product managers has to be very close to the customer. The fact that it's like an organizational function doesn't mean that you neglect the customer piece. Product managers need to be in the front line, in front of customers, talking to customers every day, or at the very least every week, to be able to understand, how they're experiencing their product, what are the current pain points, is he really solving that problem? And that focus on customers allow product managers to be able to get the data and all the knowledge that they need to be able to enable everyone else in the organization do the job that they're supposed to do. So product manager is a very, very important job in technology and across the industry, as we see it come up in different forms. And it all starts with vision. So when I want to then break product management down further, it's like it starts with that vision. You really talk to your customers, you really understand what they do. Then how do you then break that down? How do you make that possible? And you start with like the idea phase. So I'm going to break this down into like 6 different phases, and we'll then go through like each of them and talk through, what those mean. So it starts with the idea phase. Then you go into the think phase. So in the idea phase, that you do a lot of customer validation, and I'll explain that in detail in a second. And then the think phase, you're trying to really validate some of those solutions. What would they come up to be? Next, you then go into the explore phase. You're going through different solutions and different ideas on what can actually possibly work. This phase, you're doing is very, very quick and fast to be able to see what can actually solve your customer problem. And then you have the build phase. So the build phase typically takes the longest, because that's where you actually, get your engineers, get your designers under the same roof, in the same room, talking to each other and then working through that process. So sometimes that takes a long time, but thanks to agile development, you can actually get value in quick iterations. And then after that, you have your launch, and then you have your growth phase. So once you build something, the idea is to launch it. So sometimes launching doesn't really work very, very well. So there are bugs with it. So then you have to go back to the build phase. So this cycle goes on and on and on again for as many times as possible until you reach something called product market fit. And then at that time, you have a product that's mature, a product that makes sense, a product that people understand. And at that time, you're just trying to grow the user base or retain customers over a very long time. So that's pretty much how I like to break down product management into these phases. And then if you want to think about the idea and think phase, so you want to collectively talk about those 2 phases, it's kind of like, you're identifying user pain points. Remember, you're talking to them as much as possible. Next up, you want to recognize the core of the problem. So you really want to understand what are the user motivators when people are actually, speaking about the problems that they face. And then you also want to then determine the key stakeholders. So sometimes you might hear customer, you might hear user. So sometimes your user isn't your customer. So a customer is someone who typically pays for the products. So your user can be someone totally different. So being able to understand that is very, very important. So if you think about, if you're making, an app for kids or a toy, for example, the customer is probably the parents, but the user is the children. So you need to be able to think about those stakeholders when you're designing and when you're building your product. So essentially, the ways to be able to go about this is like, you want to become an expert in the problem area. So you're doing a lot of user research and background research, anything that's actually out there that, can give you any insights on what the customers do and how they do it. Taking that time to really understand everything is very, very important. And that kind of like sets the standard for what you do moving forward. Next, you want to then feel empathy towards those that it affects. You want to then put yourself in the customer's shoes as much as you can to really understand, hey, what are the things that they're going through? Why is this more important than this? They'll tell you a bunch of different things, but it's up to you to be able to prioritize and understand which one is the most important for your users. Next up, you then find clues on how to approach a solution. So it's important that when you're talking to your customers, you want to be able to then understand, like, what are the different clues that can actually have that people are giving you on what can actually solve their problem. So it's really important to be able to like understand that and pay close attention. And I call this phase the why phase. So this is typically where you're doing a lot of high level strategy and you're actually facing users. So you do a lot of generative and exploratory research where you're just trying to really define that problem. Einstein has this famous quote that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes understanding the problem and 5 minutes solving it. And this is essentially what this phase like encompasses. It's like why does a problem exist? Because this why will come up in so many areas, and then it's up to you to justify all those things. So the main points here is like you're understanding your crucial customer problems. You really understand the motivators that are moving them to be able to solve that problem, and you want to then match that problem to business opportunity. You want to make sure that your business is also going to get benefit from this, whether it's users, whether it's revenue, whether it's like data. It depends on what it is that you're trying to do. So you need to be able to match what the users want to what your business finds valuable. So that's the why phase. Next, in the explore phase, you want to be able to optimize for learning fast. You don't want to take too much time to be able to think through. You don't want to focus on perfection. You just want to be able to like put things in front of your customers very quickly to see if they work. So this is when you want to experiment with different solutions, think far and wide, get very creative, grab a couple people in the room, do a lot of brainstorming sessions and test very quickly. Then you want to then prototype ideas. And by prototype, I don't mean like build something. If you have that fast, then sure, go ahead. But honestly, you can just draw different sketches on paper and then bring it to your customers and see if they understand it, just to be able to communicate some of those concepts very, very quickly to make sure like they understand what it is that you're trying to do. So in that phase, you're also getting user feedback. So getting user feedback is super important because you want to be able to make sure that you're focusing on the problem and you're sure that it's going to be able to solve it by the time you release it. Next, you also want to then validate and align. So if you test something, if it doesn't work, you go back to the drawing board. Does that match your product vision? So you need to be able to do that constantly before you find something that actually sticks and that your customers can get a lot of value from. Next, you want to then decide on a direction. So a lot of the times, you have like 5, 10 different ideas that can solve a user's problem. You want to be able to decide on one clear direction for your team to follow, and then you want to go ahead and then build that, because you can't build, all 5 or all 10 things at once. So you want to be able to decide on a direction based off of this phase. And then this is what I call the what phase. So essentially, this is also the execution piece. You do a lot of rapid prototyping, usability testing, evaluative research. So you want to then define a clear vision, list out different solutions, and then validate them amongst the different ones that you've considered. So at this point, you probably have like a matrix of saying, what, we've tried, solution ABC, A seems to resonate with people more, so we'll spend our resources, on A. So this is where at this time you probably, get a designer, work with them and then explore different things with them. So you can do this on your own, but obviously it's better to involve your team as early as possible. And next up, we have the build phase. So in the build phase, like I said, it takes the longest, but the way to be able to streamline that process is determine an MVP. So an MVP is what you call your minimum viable product, which is sort of like the smallest set of things that you can test. And I'll talk more about MVPs later on. Next, you want to optimize for learning. The goal and the one goal that you should have when releasing an MVP is for learning fast. You don't want to be spending too much time or resources on your MVP. You want to put it out there and learn as fast as possible. Next up, you want to then deliver solutions in frequent chunks. So you don't spend, 3 months or 6 months building out your solution. You need to be able to build something in 2 weeks and then test it out. Another 2 weeks, test it out, a week if possible as well, because that prevents you from making mistakes and makes you align with that vision. So you make sure you're not losing track of what your customers want. So this is the how phase. You're scoping out the development effort, you're building out your backlog and your roadmap. You already kind of know what you're going to build, and then you're just building that iteratively. So this is where you're doing a lot of like the technical stuff, and then you're executing on that idea. So, the big themes here are agile development, project management. You want to also build a test, as fast as possible. And then you have your launch and growth phase. And I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially it's like, before you launch, you need to be able to understand what are your success metrics. You want to also obviously note them down. You want to collect early feedback. You want to then realign and change scope if necessary. So that cycle of, you build and then you launch, you want to then do that continuously to make sure that, you're really solving the problem, because it fosters continuous improvement. So usually when you launch something, it's never really perfect the first time. So you want to be able to like continually improve it, whether it's performance, whether it's speed, whether it's user experience, entirely up to you. But it really depends on what your priorities are. And then you are investing in keeping your current customers engaged. So you're focusing on retention, making sure they don't leave your app, they don't leave your product. So it's important to be able to spend time doing this. Next, you want to then execute your strategy to acquire new customers. So that's when you want to then keep growing and think about, hey, what is the growth, of this product? So you want to then think about what's the strategy that I can use to acquire our new customers. So pretty much those are like the stages that I like to define product management. You have your idea and think phase, which is kind of like your why, the explore phase, which is your what, the build phase, which is your how, and then your launch and growth phase, which is, I would say, kind of like your when. And then, after that, even taking a step back when you want to actually begin the entire process, if you want to find and define problems, everyone has a lot of problems that they want to solve. I try to tell people that, don't just go straight to like, hey, I have an idea for an app and then I'm going to build it. You want to be able to take your time to be able to find important problems. Yes, it's valuable to be able to build something, but it's important to build something valuable. So in order to find and define problems, I always tell people to look at the customer motivations, really understand what customers are saying, what they want, talk to them, then just come up with ideas and build them, talk to customers. Pretty much that's like kind of like 80% of the job that I do, really understanding customer problems. That's why I'm taking this presentation from the lens of a product manager. And then you want to understand the job customers are hiring your product to do. So there's a concept called jobs to be done that I'll talk about in a second. And it talks about, customers hire products to be able to do things. And then you want to then focus on outcome. Like what are the things that they want to get from, that product? It's not necessarily, about the features that you're building. It's about what does it get them? And I'll give you a couple examples. So there's this thing called, age-old jobs, new solutions. And Jeff Bezos is very famous for saying, focus on the things that don't change. The things that humans have wanted to do, for years, tens of years have remained the same, but the ways people do them are almost different. Right? And I'll give you an example. So focusing on what I'm saying, focus on the things that don't change. The things that people do barely change. The way that we do them, change, from, year to year. So you really think about what are the things that people really want to do. Going back to understanding motivators, it really help you figure out what you want to build. So for example, people wish to pass time during their daily commute. Historically, they use newspapers. They will go read the newspaper every morning on your way to work. You grab a newspaper. If you're sitting in traffic, you read this. Or if you're sitting in your commute, now people do that through Twitter. So it's the same job that people have wanted to do since like the 70s and the 80s, even earlier. Now people use Twitter. So technology has come and made that possible. So focusing on that user motivation is important. Next thing, people wish to put their favorite photos in a prominent place for others to see. So if you think about, your homes back at home, or even like to your parents' homes or your grandparents' homes, it looks something like this. You always had a place where you put a family photo, so whenever your guests come, they can see it. For whatever reason, people always wanted to do this, and now, people still do this, but they do this in a different way, which is people post things on Facebook and Instagram, so that need again never changed, but the way people did them changed. So you need to think about what do people want to do, what have they been doing, and then how can technology come and make that easier. Next, people wish to store their files in a safe place and easily give others access. And in the past, and I also remember doing this in secondary school, is like, I have a flash drive, whenever I wanted to like, have music, or when I used to use an MP3 player, I'll put songs in a flash drive, and then you take it to school and you want to be able to share that to someone, you have pictures of movies and then you hand it over to the person. So these things have always happened, years on end. And then now people use Dropbox to do that. So instead of being physically present to hand you that USB key or hard drive, I can just send you a link through Dropbox to, OneDrive, through Google Drive, so going back to what Jeff Bezos said, focus on the things that don't change. people still want to, people still want to fight loneliness. People don't want to miss out. People want to be involved. People want to, laugh. People want to smile. People want to be entertained. People have done that in several ways in the past, and the technology is coming today to be able to make that easy and possible in so many different ways. So that's one of the things that I try to focus on as a product manager, that you don't want to listen to like, hey, I want this app or I want this thing. You want to really understand what the core of the problem is, because that's going to actually help you solve that problem with focus on attention. And then, so if you want to make things people want, to Uchi's point, his goal is to get more people to create startups and companies. So I urge you to all follow this approach. If you want to make things people want, number one, you can take out the steps. Number two, you can make it possible for more people. Number three, you can make it possible in more situations. So these are the three common ways to make things people want. Obviously, there are more ways, but I usually like to focus on these, three ways, and I'll explain it in a second. So for example, if you want to take out the step, if you want to think about like taxis, so prior to 2010, if you wanted to call a taxi, whether in Nigeria or anywhere in the world, it starts with you need to find that taxi number for the city that you're in. If you're not in the city, you have to actually find that number. So otherwise, you have it saved on your phone. You then call the number, call the dispatcher, and say, hey, I need a taxi. You tell them, hey, I'm at so location, come and pick me up. And then you might even tell them that hey, this is where I'm going. But if you don't tell them, they'll call you. You then identify that vehicle as the driver. They'll tell you, hey, I'm in Toyota Prius or whatever. You identify the vehicle. You know who your driver is. Next, you then tell them, hey, I'm going to, so place. You might have told the dispatcher, or you have to tell the driver. Or in some cases, you tell both. Next, we then discuss payment type. Oh, I don't collect cash. I don't collect American Express. I only do Visa, blah. It's always very stressful. So you want to then discuss the payment type. Next, we then pay. So these are like 7 different steps that you've had to do. And obviously, we thought this was normal because obviously, if you wanted to go from one place to the other, if you didn't have a car and if you didn't want to take public transport, you had to take a taxi. And now, obviously, Uber came in and made this process a lot more seamless. They take all the steps that you want to do and they've taken out some of these steps. And I'll show you an example later on in this presentation on how Uber was able to really understand these 7 steps. And these 7, it's even just like a summary. There's actually more steps in there hidden under there. But Uber really understood what those things were and made it possible and created disruptive technology for that. So for the next way to make things people want, make it possible for more people. So if you want to think about blogging, in the early days of blogging, it was only limited to like technologists, people who could actually code, set up a Linux server and actually set up a website and set up a blog. So it was mainly for technologists. Journalists, it was important for their job to be able to blog, and also academics, people like professors or teachers, that need to like talk about their work and their research, things that were vital to people. That's the way that it was accessible. Blogging was something that people always wanted to do, but it was obviously hard to be able to set that up. And obviously Medium came in and made it easy that, forget having to set up everything, forget all the cost of doing this. Anyone can set up a blog, just focus on writing, and then our platform will make it possible for you. So with blogging, they really understood that this is something that a lot of people wanted to do. It was only limited to some people who was very vital for their jobs, or they were technologists and knew how to set everything up, and they made it possible for people. Now everyone and their mom has a blog, which is great. Next, make it possible in more situations. So in the past, if you wanted to pay, especially if you're trying to set up like a shop, an online store, you had to either use cash. So it was very, very limited. If people didn't have cash, then there was no way to pay you. You also have to go through a bank or an institution. If you wanted to collect payments, any other way, you have to go through a bank, which is kind of stressful. And also, you also have to have a machine. So every single time, if you're either in person or online or whatever, you're meeting people or you're meeting a partner, you needed to use a machine. So these were very restrictive. So, they were very, very situation based. Like the bank had to be open, you had to have cash, or you had to have a machine in order to move your business forward. But obviously Stripe came and changed the game for online payments. They made it possible that, anyone can actually set up an account and start getting paid today. It connects with your bank account. You don't have to worry about, different currencies or, exchange rates, or if they take this card or take this card, they just focus on getting you what you want, which is I want to get paid. So they made it possible in more situations. So if you're trying to pick an idea, think about those 3 things. Number 1, take out the steps from things that already exist. Number two, make it possible for more people. So if technology is available for only a huge set of people or a very small niche of people who can afford it or use accessibility, you want to make that possible for them, or you make it possible in more situations, and that's what Stripe did. And then I want to then talk about, the technology versus the market. Whenever you think about products that are out there, they're usually on this scale of, either, a technology impact or a market impact. And I wanted to start with, the top left, which has high technology impact and, low market impact. And that's what you call the breakthrough technology. Right? If you think about something like Google Glass. So when Google Glass came out, it was, breakthrough technology, but it was very, very cool. Everyone was like, wow, this is going to change the world. Technology was very, very high. It wasn't very, very accessible. They had to put so many things that hadn't been invented in there. But the market impact was low because, the market wasn't really ready for such a product. A lot of people didn't really understand it. It was cool. It was built with great technology, but, a lot of people couldn't really use it. And then if you want to then go to the top right and think about high technological impact and high market impact, that's what you call, you know, that's what you call it game changer, right? Game changers are something like the iPhone. Obviously, they had to invent a new way to be able to interact with this device, which was like a touch screen, which wasn't very common at that time. So it was game changing because it also had a huge market impact. Everyone saw this and it was like, wow, I really want to get one of these. They really understood what people wanted. They wanted a phone, they wanted an iPod, they wanted an internet connected device. So it was a game changer. So when you use high impact with technology and high market impact, you have your game changers. Next, there are actually cases where they have low technological impact but huge market impacts. That's what you call the disruptive technology. When you think about, hey, this is disruptive, that's what they're referring to. And that's what you call like the Ubers and the Airbnb. If you think about it, the technology behind Uber is not that complicated. It's simply a mobile app. Obviously, the distributive systems that, try and make everything more efficient. But to some degree, the technology has been available for many years. But obviously, the penetration in the market was super high and was very disruptive. So sometimes, it only takes, someone to really think about the real problem that people are facing to be able to actually come up with something that changes the way we interact with, technology. And lastly, with low technological impact and low market impact, this is when you have your incremental changes. So this is where you have your 12 to 12,000, to-do list apps. This is where you have your Figma versus Sketch. You have things whereby, there are a lot of competition in the space, but some of them are just making incremental changes to be able to get more market impact. So if you think about Sketch, which is a tool that, designers use to design, Figma came in and thought about, like, obviously design is very, collaborative. So they made their stuff, more accessible, for people, for not just people who had Macs, but anyone that could use the web could use Figma, and that had a higher penetration in addition to being able to collaborate. So that's why you see a lot of products are competing for market share and competing through user experience, or, really focusing on what people need to do. So I wanted to really call this out whenever you think about, what product you're trying to build. And then next, I talked about understanding the jobs that customers need to be able to move forward. And I wanted to talk about jobs to be done. And essentially, it's an approach to discovering users' needs that's based on the premise that customers don't buy products, they hire them to do a job. If you think about it, that, you don't hire a phone, but technically you do. You don't hire Spotify, or you don't hire Apple Music, but thinking about it like that allows you to be able to understand, as the product manager or as the product thinker or as the engineer, allows you to really think about what is the main reason why people are doing this. If you think about any job, you're hired and you have requirements and you have responsibilities, and they're not responsibilities that you set for yourself. They're responsibilities that obviously your superiors have set for you. So similarly, when people hire a device or hire a product, they have responsibilities that they want, carried out. And if the product isn't meeting those responsibilities, they then fire those products. And that's when you see people switch from one product to the other because they've been able to fail to do this. So for example, if you think about, the weather app, the number one job a weather app has is mainly to tell people, not necessarily like people don't really care if it's like 22 degrees outside or it has 80% humidity. What does that even mean? What people care about when they look at the weather app is, hey, do I need to carry an umbrella? Do I need to wear shorts? Do I need to wear a sweater? That's how people think if you want to be able to think of, if you want to open the weather app or ask for the weather. But a lot of weather apps get this wrong because they're allowing people do that math in their head of like, okay, what does 21 degrees mean? Is this right? And that's why people always go out and say, wow, I picked the wrong outfit, because the weather app was failing to be able to, tell them the right thing to do. So if you think about it, weather apps, merely the main goal or the main job weather apps have is mainly for clothing or situations if I'm ready to go out or not, versus actually giving me that actual digits. So that's something that we product managers understand, but apparently the weather apps don't understand. But then again, weather apps make money by providing services to other people, so they don't really care about being focused on the consumer side of things. And if you think about this chair, for example, this chair also had a job, and then for me, it needed to be ergonomic because obviously I'm sitting down like 8, 10 hours a day working. So it needs to be good for my back. In addition, it also has to also look good in my apartment. It matches a lot of other things that I have. So it needed to be aesthetically pleasing and not this ugly piece of furniture that I had. So that's kind of like the job. Whenever I wanted to buy this chair, I thought through those things and I factored into that before I decided to make the decision. Next thing, if you think about Spotify, it's not just listening to music. So the reason why people hire Spotify is also to discover new music. I also want to see what my friends are listening to. At the end of the year, I want to understand what are the song picks that I had throughout the year. Those are the main reasons why people hire Spotify to do those jobs. And the product managers really understand those things. And that's why they build features that really focus, on that. So whenever you're thinking about your next idea, you need to think about what is going to be the requirements that your users have for it versus the things that you just want to build. And then so, going back to thinking about why jobs to be done is important is because like it lets you focus and make things people want. When you're solving the needs that already exist, you don't need to be able to convince people that they need your product. Jeff Bezos also said that it's easier to make things people want than to make people want things. So a lot of times, you see people build apps and then they try to force users to use it. And it's like, I don't want to use this because you didn't make something that people wanted. So if you wanted to focus on their needs that already exist, you don't need to convince people, you just need to show them and then they would use it because it's solving their problem and then they'll continue using this over time. So if you want to then focus on like the job, for example, so if you think about a simple action such as like taking a photo, right? So it's a very simple action, but done in 3 different ways. So I'll give you an example. So if you want to take a photo, you might want to, once you take that photo, you want to back it up so it appears on all your devices. So that's one job that you might actually have for taking that photo. Next, you might actually want to like make it more interesting before you share it. So this has like 2 jobs in there. So you want to make it interesting and you also want to share it, but that's also from the action of taking a photo. Next, you might also want to like showcase your work so you can get hired for future engagements. So the simple act of taking a photo, people can have these 3 different motivations. And, by not understanding what your users are doing, you might actually build the wrong product. So if you think about all 3 of these jobs, the example products that people are using for that is number 1, iPhoto. So if you use an iPhone, if you take a picture, you're rest assured that if you go on your Mac or your iPad, the photo is there. If you want to make your photos look more interesting before you share it with friends, you can use Instagram or Facebook by using filters. Facebook and Instagram really understood that, and that's why a lot of people use them, because they want to make their photos look interesting because they don't think they're photographers. And if you think about showcasing your work to get future engagements or future gigs, that's like 500 pixels, which is a site for professional photographers to actually sell their pictures, to get it licensed or to actually get gigs, to be able to get new jobs, whether it's like a wedding or promotional shoots. So these are 3 different products, all based off of one action, which is taking a photo. And if you take a photo, you take a photo with your phone or with your camera, but you really need to just understand that like people are not just tell you that, hey, I'm gonna take a photo, or I want an app that takes photos. You need to understand what job do they want to get done from doing that, and then once you figure that out, that helps you understand what kind of product you need to build. And if you think about iPhoto, Instagram versus 500 pixels, they are very, very different products serving different markets. And then also then want to talk about attributes versus motivation, right? So if you think about it, I want to give you like an example, for example, Facebook gave this example, which is like a mother of 3 in the USA posting a photo of their family barbecue, and a teenager in Korea posting photos of a house party, they have the exact same motivation. Facebook is one company that really, really understands jobs to be done and really, really understands user research. Because if you think about it, they have 2 billion users, and obviously everyone is unique in some way, but to be able to build a product that serves this many people, it's actually it's very, very impressive because they focus on the motivation and they're able to see like we're a lot more similar in ways that we don't realize. So these people have different roles, they have different attributes, they have different backgrounds, but they have the same motivation, because it's important to be able to focus on why people do things versus like who they are and what they do. So that's kind of like what jobs to be done helps you uncover. So in order to like understand what jobs people are doing, like people ask me all the time, so okay, how do I go about understanding jobs to be done? What do I do? How do I make this work? The best way to be able to do that is honestly just like talk to your users. It might seem very, very trivial, but as an engineer or someone who can code or design, it's easy to just like go straight to your computer and build stuff. But what we do as product managers is to try and figure out, like, are we building the right thing? So a lot of times I question myself, it's like, hey, are we building the right thing for our users? And it's our job to be able to make sure that we're building that right thing and we're making sure that we're using resources, very well. So that's pretty much what I do. And I encourage you, like, you don't have to go all out and do it the same way that we do as product managers, but you can go ahead and like keep talking to them as much as you can. So I'll actually break for questions here. Does anyone have any questions before I proceed? Because I don't want to just like keep talking and then just keeping all of you there. So do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chef, for me so far. For me,
I
it's
see
been
there's like 2 questions in the Q&A, but I don't think I have access to that. Doctor, please could you help me out with some of those questions that people have posted?
sure I can do that. Olaide is asking, do I need coding experience to become a product manager? Number two question she has is, what certifications are relevant to becoming a certified product manager?
Okay, good question. So number one, no, you don't need to learn how to code to be a product manager. I honestly know like maybe 5% of product managers still code, to be honest. I don't code anymore. Like I used to, I understand code, but you don't have to. It's not a requirement. So don't think that, in order for you to try and be a product manager, you need to learn how to code. I think that's a common misconception which prevents people from going into product. So you don't have to worry about that. In terms of certification, you also don't need a certification to be a product manager. I don't have a certification. I have an engineering degree. I also know people who don't have degrees and are still product managers. I know people with marketing degrees from cinema studies, degrees from photography, and are product managers today at like very well-respected companies. So you don't really need a certification. I think you just need to focus on what you can do and getting your skills to be able to do that. So that's the question. That's the answer to the question. Is there a third question? I think it was the third one.
Yes, there are two other questions. Are there open source helpful tools for these phases? For e.g., design thinking, what tools or methodologies do you recommend?
Okay, good. Is there any open source tools for these things? So it really depends. So if you really think about it, like a lot of those things that you're doing is like prototyping, which you can do with like, yeah, actually taking a second to understand. So you're really brainstorming, and brainstorming, you can actually just do that like over Zoom or in person, and you're just using stickies. So with design thinking, you're going through, rapid prototyping, dot voting, and all that. So I think you could do that very, very easily on your own. When you go to the prototyping stage, there are lots of tools that you can use. There's Figma, there's Balsamic, there's InVision. Some of these things are free that you can actually use to actually get your ideas out very, very quickly, and then so you can proceed. So I'll say like you can go through the process of everything up until like where you have to like build something and write code without actually having to pay any money or use any tools that cost any money. Obviously, when you want to build something, if you're not a developer, you have to hire a developer, then that's something that you have to do. But other than that, I think you can go through the cycle by just like doing a bunch of different tools, doing bunch of Googling and stuff. That's how you can. But I think the main thing is like once you really understand the problem, go through your why, and then it's easy to then like do all the other steps. Is there one more? I'll take one more question before I
Yes.
proceed.
Someone is asking difference between product management and project management.
Cool. That's a very good question. I get that question very often. So if you think about the phases, so there's the why, what, and how. So product managers typically focus on the why. So the why is where you see like maybe consultants, doing a lot of strategy, really thinking about the problem. So that's where product managers do. Product managers define problems and then find solutions to it. So with project managers, you don't get to define the problem. You don't really get to talk to your users. All you're giving is like, hey, here's a project, here's a timeline. So you're mainly focused on the how phase. So maybe you're working with your engineering team, your engineering lead, and your design team to actually work on that. So all you care about is like kind of like the milestones. Hey, are you hitting, the deadlines that are supposed to hit? You manage costs, you manage timelines, but you don't really know how the product actually impacts users. So that's what product managers do. So product managers go through the why, what, and how. Sometimes product managers just focus on the why and the what, versus the project managers or project owners only focus on the how. So yeah, that's kind of like the difference between project and product management. Cool, awesome. Yeah, no worries. All right, cool. Let me continue. So then, so I wanted to really understand, like, take a second to really explain all the things properly before going on to the other things. And yeah, the two other parts of the presentation before we just have like an open Q&A. Okay, so how to impact product decisions. So next thing is navigating your why. So I like to tell people like the why is the most important point, product management. Like we spend so much time on this why. And then the reason is because you don't want to then end up, because building things take time. You don't want to end up after 6 months or after 1 year and you ended up building the wrong thing. A lot of companies run into this. So being able to navigate your why is super important. And then that starts with picking a problem space. So remember we talked about how to find and define problems, but if you want to pick a problem space, you can do it in two ways. You can pick your personal pain points. So this is even true if you want to like start a side project, or just work on something on the side. You can actually just pick a personal pain point because it allows you to be able to feel empathy towards the problem. If it's your problem, you know what the solution looks like. You really understand how you want to feel after you use that product. So that empathy is already there. You don't really need to think about it too much. Next thing, it's also easier to find clues to the solution. Obviously, since it's a problem that you go through day in, day out, whether it's like, something as simple as, you don't wake up early in the morning because, your alarm clock doesn't serve you. You understand like how do you design a better alarm clock that will work for you, for example. Next, you're also motivated and passionate as a key stakeholder. So if it's your problem, if you have trouble waking up and you don't want to be late, you're very motivated to solve that problem. So if you're really looking for a problem space, personal problems are always a good place to start. And then you can also figure out like pain points of others. So if you don't really have any, major problems that you feel like is worth spending time solving, you can think about what are the things that other people are going through, and then that's when you have less bias because, you're not just thinking about this from your lens. So you're thinking about it from others and you're really trying to understand what it is that they do. Next, it also encourages you to learn more. So you don't want to make any assumptions. You want to make sure like you're talking to them, you do a lot of background, you do a lot of things about, what are the other things that are out there that people do. So it really encourages you to learn more about the problem and your users. And then you're also driven by helping others because, the stakeholder is someone else besides you, you really think about them when you're making your decisions and when you want to actually figure out how to solve that problem. So next, after you pick the problem, whether it's a personal pain point or pain points of others, you want to then build your product vision. And remember, product vision leads every single thing that you want to do. I like to tell people that, in order to also impact product decisions, as a product manager, you're not doing it alone. So when you pick the problem, you're focused on your users. When you're building out the product vision and you're going through the cycle of building everything, you have your users in mind and your customers in mind, but you need to be able to get your team on board and get your team very, very excited in order to be successful. So this is what I like to call preach, right? I always tell people as a product manager, you need to preach. Just preach, 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 preach. I actually need to trademark this to some point because I actually came up with this. And this is essentially what I do very, very regularly. So whenever I want to start a new project or have a new idea that I want to carry out, I've done some user research, I go ahead and then preach. And it starts with, preparing insights, Next thing, you want to then rehearse your key points. You want to then excite the team, adjust any assumptions. You want to collaborate on the next steps, and then you want to then highlight, what success looks like. That's what I call preach. So any single time you want to work with the team, whether it's a new team or a new project or get people together, preaching is the best way to communicate your product vision, to them. And then the way it works is like you prepare your insights. So as a product manager, you want to really understand and take time to really figure out how you understood the problem space. That is very, very important because it's going to come up in many places and people will ask you why a lot. Next, you want to do existing research in the space. So you want to see, how have other people solved that problem? So going back to the example of the newspaper, what time do people get their newspapers, in the day? How many pages do they read? What are the most interesting columns that they read? So research into that space is very interesting. Has there been any innovation? All those things are super important for you to be able to understand because they will come up and impact the decisions that you make. Customer quotes are also very, very good. So when you want to prepare your insights, if you're preparing this, you also want to present it. So you're preparing this in mind to present it to people later on. So getting customer quotes about the problem or how they're doing things is actually super, super valuable to use. Next, you want to then justify your why. As much as possible, you need to believe that, look, this is important for you. This is important for you. This is important for your organization. This is important for your customers. You need to justify it by any means possible because people will question you. People will not understand what you're going to do. So you need to be able to justify this. Once you have all your insights, you're in a much better position to be able to do that. And then when you're justifying your insight, you want to be able to talk about, like I said, the benefit for the user, benefit for the organization. Next, you want to rehearse your key points. So you can do this on your own before you present it to your stakeholders or to your management. You know, to be able to understand why is this problem important to solve. You need to also believe it, and then your stakeholders need to believe it. And sometimes when you're working at a company where sort of the product vision is already set, you also need to buy in that vision. And even if you don't believe in that vision, you better make sure that you can communicate it to your team so that they understand why it's important. Because the last thing that you want is for everyone on your team to feel like you're not engaged or you don't care about what it is that you're doing. So it's very important. Next, why should they care? They should care about it because it's going to give you X amount of revenue next quarter, or X amount of users will be happy, or X amount of users will not leave, or X amount of users will renew their contract, or you'd actually save X amount of lives. So why should they care is super important. So those key points is something that you need to rehearse and reiterate. Also, what opportunity arises from solving the problem? So even if you don't agree with what the things that they're doing, as long as there's an opportunity there, it's also important to spin off, because sometimes, you work on things where, the company wants, short-term benefits, and then they might sacrifice some long-term gains, but you need to be able to then focus on those short-term benefits and then you figure out the problem for later. Obviously, it's your job to also make sure the organization is in line with that, but sometimes it's a battle that you lose. And I just want to just recognize that. So being able to talk about the different opportunities for solving the problem will really help you get your team on board. Because remember, the product vision side of it now is about getting your team and internal stakeholders on board. Next, you want to excite the team. This is super important. I can't tell you how important this is because the last thing you want is for a team of engineers and designers to not give a shit about what you're doing or to not actually want to show up for you, because as a product manager, to the person who asked, do you need to code? If you don't know how to code, your developer needs to code for you. And if your developer says he doesn't want to code for you or wants to just work on, some other technical project, then you're pretty much screwed. And, your manager is not going to care about the reason why. They really expect you to get the job done. So one thing that I like to do is I like to book one-on-ones with, all the people on the team before I start working on a project to really just get to know who they are. You really understand how they like to work. I want to understand each person's motivations, because you have some developers who, care about the technology side, they care about code quality, but you also have some who actually care about, the work that is going to impact customers, like how customers really feel, and they want to really be involved in the design process. So really understanding everyone's motivators, how allows you to be able to place them properly and involve them in the right place so you're not wasting anyone's time. You want to also get input on how they like to work. How do they like their stories? What time of the day do they like to work? Do they like stand-up? Do they not like stand-up? So being flexible is very, very important. And you having that impression before that project starts that, hey, you know what, I'm here for you, I'm here to serve you, actually goes a long way to get your team on board. And you want to then make them understand like how important they are. You need to tell them that, hey, you can't do this without them, because they need to also feel part of the team. No one likes to be told what to do. As product managers, you don't, you know, your team doesn't report to you. You can only influence them. So you need to make sure that, look, you can't do it without them, and exciting them is one of the ways that you need to do this. Going back to preaching, you want to address any assumptions. Of course, as a product manager, you make so many assumptions. Even though you talk to as many users as possible, you know, they might say A and you might think you heard like, you know, A star or A plus. So you need to be able to think about, you know, any assumptions that you might have after talking to them. So you want to then acknowledge them where present. So tell your team is like, you know, I think this is what they said, or this is what they want. You know, you need to be able to address any assumptions that you have, and then try to, you know, make sure like you have as less like as least of an assumption as you can. Oh, sorry, actually, that's not correct. You want to make sure that you have very, very little assumptions before going in. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to say. You want to then answer any clarifying questions, because your team will have 1,001 questions on, you know, how something works, on, you know, what the user said, what the user wants to do, why does the user want to do this. You need to make sure you answer any clarifying questions, and they want to then make a plan to mitigate any setbacks that you might have. Whether it's an assumption, you want to talk about, hey, this is your plan to be able to counter this assumption, or if this doesn't work, this is what you're going to do. So calling those out and making plans for that is very, very helpful for the team to be able to get together. Next, you want to collaborate on the next steps, which is also another very important thing. So this is where you get together with your team, do a lot of brainstorming, brainstorm a lot of ideas, get them involved as early as possible, because they want to feel that, you know, they've made some decisions in here. They're not just told what to do. And then you want to then get their input and then allow them to contribute in whatever ways. Next, and lastly, you want to then highlight what success looks like. So it's important that you continue to paint that picture of when that solution is available. You know, going back to your vision, the reason why a vision exists is to say, hey, you know what, you're going to make the world a better place. Your customers are going to be happy. Your business is going to be happy. You're going to make more money, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So painting that vision is very important. Next, you also want to then define the next steps on how to get there. You know, you talk about like, yes, there's this future, but like, how are we going to get there? This is the steps, step A, B, C. These are the things that we need to do. It's very important to be able to call that out very early on. And then lastly, you want to then organize what the team needs to do to get started. So, you know, does someone have to start, you know, researching this tech stack? Or does someone have to like set up the repository? Or does someone have to like build the backlog? You know, getting started early and getting people excited, you know, is like a good way to be able to like highlight like, hey, this is very successful. This is what you can do. Then organize before you kickstart a project. So next up, after this section, I'll take questions. I won't take questions now, but after this section, I'll take some questions. So after, you know, after you get the buy-in from the customers and the buy-in for your team, in order to then be successful as a product manager, you then need to be able to, you know, do the following. So a lot of good product managers, you know, they set that direction. So when I describe product management, I describe it into like product direction, you know, which is kind of like the product strategy, product execution, probably yeah, there's usually direction and execution and product delivery type of thing. So good product managers actually set the direction. And the reason why the direction is important is because they try to build the right thing. You know, it's very easy to just like build something, you know, some of us might have done that several times, you know, you can spin up an app over a weekend, or you can do something in a hackathon, which is very great. And I don't discount any of those efforts. And I think you should do that. But as a good product manager, you want to build the right thing. You don't want to build something that, you know, will be thrown away later on. You want to build something that people will use. So good product managers actually try to set that direction to build the right thing. Next, and the most important function of a product manager is to de-risk failure. You know, you don't want to spend 1 year and, you know, $5 million building something and then it goes bust. You know, you want to de-risk that failure as much as possible, because organizations are relying on their product managers to be able to solve very, very important problems. So the way you can de-risk that failure is to really, really understand that customer problem. You know, I think that's one of the advocates of. I'm a huge advocate of really talking to your customers, and that's pretty much one of the things that I've been repeating throughout this talk is understanding your customer problems. Next, focus on getting feedback quickly and effectively. Don't wait 6 months before you get it into the hands of the customer. Get it out in like a week or two. Get that feedback so you know if you're building something right or you need to like kill it like as soon as possible. So that de-risking failure is super important for product managers to make those calls. And then you want to be able to learn from each product iteration. So every single time you build something, you want to make sure that you've learned something new and you're not just doing all the things that you want to do because you've decided that you're going to build X and X is not what the users want, but you're just going to still build it any other way. So you need to be able to learn from each product iteration and you should be able to change the way you behave. And the best ways product managers can do all those things to set that direction and to de-risk failure is by building a minimum viable product. So you've all heard about MVP, or some of you might have heard about it, and it's called the minimum viable product. And I want to spend some time, talking about what this looks like. So an MVP is essentially something very simple. I always stress it that people really focus on an MVP being super great and super everything, and no, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that. It should be something very very simple because it is your starting point. It's like essentially where you start out to be able to get to your goal. It's one of the like small foundations of your MVP as you go through those stages. It helps you validate an idea. So the important thing about an MVP is like, hey, you want to validate an idea very quickly and very, very effectively and very, very, cost effectively, actually, if I might say. Next, you want to then find early customers. So the simple thing that you're building is supposed to be that starting point to validate an idea and find early customers. Next thing, you want to then collect feedback. That feedback is important because that feedback sets the direction of what you should do. Should you keep moving forward or should you move back? Then it's a deliberate attempt to learn. So you don't build an MVP for building an MVP's sake. The reason why you want to build an MVP is like before you even launch it, you want to then say, hey, these are the things that I want to learn. Because, if I meet some of these metrics, then I know that, okay, this is successful or not. We'll have to go back and tweak it. So it's really up to you to really figure out what it is that you want to learn because that's super important. So let's figure out what the problem is. So it's a deliberate attempt to learn about the problem. So you can learn about the problem space that you're in. You can learn about the customers, who the customers are, what do they do, how do they do it. It's very, very important. Next, also learning about the market. So if you're in a new environment, new market, you're going to some unknown territory, it's important to put out an MVP so you learn how the market reacts to that. So it's a huge attempt to learn in that area. And then it helps you reduce waste because like it's important to build something small in 2 weeks and then throw that away versus build something over 3 months or 6 months and then you're like, wow, we have to throw this away. Then that's a lot of effort and your team obviously feels sad about that. So it helps you reduce waste. And then obviously saves you a ton of time. It's important as a PM to be able to manage your resources as effectively as possible. And then, yeah, manage your energy and manage your resources. So, like I said, it's supposed to help you start the learning process very quickly. The way you go about this is to test your riskiest assumptions first. So when you want to build an MVP, it's not about just like, oh, you're making everything tight, making everything work. You need to focus on what's the riskiest thing that you need to test, and that's what you should build first. Or that's the only thing that you should actually build. And some things that people usually like to test is, will people pay for it? Will people use it? And then, is this even a problem? So some people are like, what I'm building, is it going to actually solve anybody's problem? Because any app or any product that you're building should solve a problem. People don't just use apps for using sake. It solves a particular problem for them. So being able to test that if this is a problem should be something that you should really want to do. Next, you should then choose limited functionality. So don't go ahead and, if the riskiest assumption is one thing out of, your 5 features, that's the only thing you should build. You shouldn't go ahead and say, okay, you know what, it needs, all these things to survive. So choose limited functionality is important before moving forward. And they want to then focus on a small set of users. So you're not going to test this out on everybody and all your users. You want to focus on a group of them who are very, very passionate about the problem, really experience this problem on a day-to-day basis, or weekly basis, or whatever cadence makes sense for your product. You want to focus on them, and then you want to then make sure that those are the people giving you your feedback. So you don't care about growth at this point. You just want to be quick and very, very efficient in what you're doing so you can actually go back to the drawing board if you need to. And then really, there's something I always tell people, that you only truly learn when you ship. So a lot of people, you can come up with prototypes, like clickable prototypes, and put them in front of customers. Yes, that's a good way to be able to learn things, but I wouldn't really call that an MVP. When you actually get it into the hands of people in a real life capacity, and that's when you truly learn from how they're using it. So the process for an MVP that I like to tell people, you have an idea. So similar to like how you have your idea phase, you want to then build. So once you've done all the things that you want to do in between the idea and the build phase, so you've done your think, you've done your explore. So you want to build, and then immediately after building, you want to measure, right? You want to think about what are the things that you need to measure those things, and that will give you an insight if it's working or not. And once you measure something, you've learned, right? You've learned that, this idea works or it doesn't work, or it kind of works. So those are your three options. It works, it doesn't work, or it kind of works. If it kind of works, how do you make it work? That should be your priority. If it works, great. Move on to the next thing. Add more stuff into it. Make sure that you don't take that away. If it doesn't work, kill it. You don't need to spend time forcing people to use something that doesn't work, that clearly doesn't work. So which is why you want to invest as little time as possible in this process. So I like talking about the MVP process. It's very, very fun, and it's a very, very important thing for people to learn. And the CEO of Y Combinator said this: like, hold the problem tightly, hold the customer tightly, but hold your solution loosely, right? Don't be scared to throw out an MVP if it doesn't work. Like I mentioned, if it doesn't work, just kill it. So understand that problem, understand the customer. You understand those two things. Those are two things that don't change if you think about it, right? Your solution changes. So it's not important to be attached to your solution. A lot of people are very, very attached because maybe it's their first product, they love it, the code works very well, it's very, very great, it's very efficient, it's very fast. No, you need to hold that loosely because it's an intentional attempt to learn. So don't forget about that. So exactly what I would say, don't fall in love with your MVP. Don't spend too much time on it, and then be flexible to change. Be willing to just throw it out and start all over again and start from the drawing board. I've worked on so many products that didn't ship because it didn't meet the bar that we wanted it to be, and it didn't meet the bar that the customers wanted. And it's too bad. You let it go. It's sad, but sometimes you have to move on because there's no point putting something in the market that wouldn't be used. You will feel much worse, trust me. So another thing that I always like to talk about is when you're shipping an MVP, if you're not actually embarrassed by what you launched, then you launch too late. So a lot of founders are like, damn, like this looks ugly, or it's not right, or it doesn't work the way it is, or it crashes. But if you're if what you're putting out there is good enough for people to learn, you'll be surprised that people wouldn't care about those things versus like caring about it solving their problem. So sometimes people always say, look, you need to be able to be embarrassed. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's essentially what this quote is trying to say. So if you didn't think about it, your vision is wide, right? You've spoken to your users, they want this future of, this great product that's going to solve all their problems. And think about your MVP is very, very small, right? So, but you need to realize that your vision is going to take you 3 years to build a team of 67 people, and it's going to cost you like $8 million to build. You don't have that money right now. I mean, at least I don't have that money right now. Maybe some of you do. So, which is why you need to be able to take a step back and say, do you know what? Let me build an MVP before I get to that vision. Every big, large company actually started with that MVP and then went to get that vision because there's no point spending a lot of time and resources to build something that people wouldn't want. And to give you some context, like Instagram actually started as a check-in app. That was what their MVP was, and they threw it away. But somewhere inside there, they learned something that they were able to use to pivot. So if they ended up building that check-in app, then obviously things wouldn't have worked out for them, right? So I also like to talk about the MVP process, and I'm sure some of you might have seen this diagram online of like, if you want to build a car, obviously the job for a car is to get you from point A to point B. You don't start by saying, I'll build one tire, I'll build two tires, then I'll build the chassis and the body, and then I'll build the car before the users can use it, So the job here is getting people from point A to point B, all right? So the best way to approach the MVP is start with the skateboard, right? A skateboard can actually get people from point A to point B. Slightly more efficient than working, but it's not that great. Then you have a scooter, slightly safer. You still have to use a lot of energy, but it's maybe faster than walking. But it actually gets people from point A to point B a lot faster. Next, you have your bicycle, a lot more efficient than the scooter, of course, but obviously it doesn't fit all the criteria. It's only limited to one person. Next, you have your motorcycle, a lot faster. You can get somewhere a lot faster than before. And then you have your car. So this is the thought of building the MVP. You focus on what people want to do before doing this. Obviously, car manufacturers don't go through this process, but it's just something for you to be able to visualize, like how how the MVP process is supposed to be. So I wanted to give you a couple examples. So with Dropbox, the way they went on with the MVP is they built a small prototype that worked on their own computer, on them or on their own servers. They made a 3-minute explainer video. So 3 minutes was just the founder, talking through, hey, this is what Dropbox does, blah blah blah, and then they shared it with their network and said, hey, this is what we're building. All right. They got like 75,000 signups overnight. That was their way of saying, let's not spend time building all these things. And obviously, these 75,000 people, it's not like they could give them the product tomorrow. No, they couldn't. They still needed to spend months building it out. But they felt safer, because they were like, okay, what we're building, people actually want it. Because based off of this explanation, this is something that they were able to do. So that's how they worked towards getting the MVP out. Airbnb, for example, it was a simple website, simple landing page. They only had one listing, and it was their own listing. It didn't have maps. It didn't have, payments. It didn't have any of that fancy stuff. It was just like a simple website that said, hey, you know what? Do you want to stay in my place? Yes or no? They listed their own homes, and then obviously they got the booking. So they're able to verify. And what the riskiest thing here that they wanted to test was, are people willing to stay in strangers' apartments? And that was the riskiest thing they wanted to test. And that's why they focused on that. It wasn't the payments part. It was like, hey, are people willing to stay? So that's what Airbnb did. So Pebble, this came out of the University of Waterloo, is one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns in the world, which was the number one the first smartwatch. So they developed a few prototypes. All right, they actually had some of these things working. Obviously, they needed stuff to manufacture, So then was like, hey, will people pay for this? So they launched on Kickstarter. They had a very, very good video to explain what they wanted. And essentially, they raised 10 million for mass production. So before going ham and going in and building more and more stuff, they actually raised a lot of money from people to be able to say, you know what, people actually want this, and it's something that we can build. So that's essentially Pebble's story. Buffer, this is a very, very interesting one. Essentially, what he worked on was, so a Buffer is, if anyone doesn't know, Buffer is like a tool to be able to automate social media posts. So they did a landing page, and they essentially just put this pricing options there. That's like, you know what, would people actually do this? And that was a way to say, would people pay for this? So what he was trying to test was like, would people pay for this? Once they included the pricing options, you know, it didn't do anything, but what they wanted to see is like how many people clicked on that. And then when people clicked on it, they just said, hey, we're not done yet, but stay in touch, put in your email. And based off of the data that he collected, he realized that like, okay, what, people want this. So this was like a very quick, efficient way to be able to test these things. And these are some of the largest tech companies in the world right now. And then they went through this process. So going through that MVP is super important because it's easy to build, but you need to take time to really validate. One thing, and this is one of my favorite stories. So Zappos, this is like late 90s website to be able to sell shoes online, right? And then the way he went about doing this is like he went to, he built a simple website. It didn't have fancy things. It didn't have like payments or any of the back end, any of the stuff. Just simple website. He then listed shoes for sale. So he'll go into stores, shoe stores like Foot Locker, Champs, or whatever, take pictures of those shoes and put it on the website. And then whenever people go to his website and buy something, what he will do is like he will walk to the store, right? Walk to the store, buy that exact same shoe, and then ship it to them by himself. So he didn't have any inventory or anything. He just wanted to really test it out, the idea. And then he just like shipped it manually by himself, and collected payments some other way. He didn't focus on building everything. He just wanted to say, look, are people going to do this? And this is honestly one of the best examples of an MVP. So the story here is like learning from your customers is definitely easier with an MVP than without, because you would have made a lot of assumptions, before before releasing your MVP. So being able to like come up with some of these things will really allow you to understand that, you're going to de-risk failure and you're going to build the right thing. And that's what you should focus on as a PM. So another thing to also remember is like launching isn't special. I can ask anyone, hey, do you remember, when Google launched? Or do you remember the day Facebook launched? Or the day, Airbnb launched or Uber launched? No one ever remembers those days. They're not very special. People remember when iPhone launches, but when the iPhone launched, but you know, everything else isn't really that special. And because we should change the definition of launching. So launching simply means to start getting customers. So don't put too much pressure on yourself when you think, oh, I need to launch something or I have to have this big bang launch. You need to be able to recognize that, when you're launching something, it just means you want to start getting users and getting customers. And that should be your goal when you launch something, to get customers, not just to just like keep it out there and let the world see it. So going back to the how to approach an MVP, you want to decide what you need to learn. You want to then pick a time frame to deliver an MVP. So weeks, not months. Don't spend many weeks working and many months working on this. You should be able to put your MVP out in a few weeks. Next, document what your initial solution looks like. That's super important. And then prioritize the most important items. Talk about, hey, this is the things that you really want to do. What are the most important things? And then cut things down. You need to cut things down, and then don't keep changing it. Prioritize it and just only say, we have 5 features. We only focus on, items 1 to 3, and those are in priority, and you don't change it. If you need to cut it, you cut 3 out, and then you cut 2 out, and then you focus on 1, essentially. So, and then the main thing you want to really understand is, does this solve the problem you wanted to solve? That's super important to be able to ask yourself. So essentially, an MVP has very limited functionality. It shouldn't address all the customers' problem. It should address potential users, only your current users. And you should focus on a small set of users. Essentially, that's what you're supposed to do with your MVP. And you should focus on higher order problems, right? You want to test your riskiest assumption, revenue, users, problem. Those are the things you need to really think about. And so there are a few tools that I can help you, I can share to be able to help you build an MVP. So some people use spreadsheets because some people need to store data, organize data, and visualize data. Obviously, you don't need to like build out a backend or spin up a MongoDB server or backend or any servers or whatever. You can do Airtable, Google Sheets, Excel. These are very, very good spreadsheets that you can use to build out an MVP. And I've seen companies actually go ahead and do this. Next, if you want to do a landing page to be able to communicate your value proposition, to generate interest, or to create signups, there's so many tools out there that you can use. There's Squarespace, there's Wix, there's Webflow. I use Webflow a lot for some of the things that I want to just like throw out there very quickly. So it's very helpful, so I don't waste a lot of time doing things that wouldn't scale. Next, if you want to have integration, so if you want to build a backend, if you need 2 apps to talk together, or you need to connect multiple services or build some form of automation, there are actually tools to be able to help you do that. You can use Zapier, or you can use like Trade.io, and some of these things are free to be able to help you. So excuse me, to be able to help you move things together. So they have really, really powerful free tools that you can use to get your MVP out and like validate something. So in summary, your MVP is, you want to go through your idea, your build, measure, and learn phase to be able to understand what it is that you want to build, because it's an intentional attempt to learn. You want to be able to provide the core functionality to customers, and then you want to be able to give you confidence over next steps. So once you understand your MVP, or you've shipped it and you've learned from it, you'll be very confident that the next thing you do would be good or be successful, because you've gotten all the data that you need to be able to move forward. So in terms of determining your MVP, identify the user journey. You want to then write out the user steps and actions. So remember what I talked about, like you write out all the user steps you need to be able to solve that problem. Next, you want to highlight the pain points of each step. So, step 1, what's the problem with those steps? You can also like take out the steps. So that helps you reveal an easier path for like the user experience. And then you can also group common actions. So what are the things that you can group and say, hey, this step, you can also do this, very, very easily using this experience or this interaction. So that's super helpful. So you figure out areas of focus. So going back to the example that I gave with taxis versus Uber, we talked about the same steps of, you have to find a taxi number, call the number, tell them your location. all these things that you needed to do previously with a taxi. And essentially, when Uber came up, they thought about, going back to the steps. They just go through request a ride, and essentially, you didn't need to find a taxi number anymore. So you could request a ride from any location that you were, in any city. So they eliminated that step completely. They even the points to call the number, they also made it optional. Obviously, you can call your Uber number, but it's very optional. It's not part of the flow at all. It's actually only part of the flow when there's something wrong. So being able to request a ride, the only thing that you have to do is tell them your location, and you do that in app versus calling people. So that's how they were able to solve that problem and create something to be able to help with that. And then you also tell them your desired destination. Next, when you want to view the trip details, you want to be able to identify the vehicle and the driver. Obviously, they're able to do that with the app very, very easily. And in terms of paying for a ride, you don't need to even discuss any payment type. You only pay through the app. So this is an example where Uber was able to group specific things with essentially 3 different features, take out some options and make things optional, whenever they were coming up with their MVP.
Hi,
So
Stephanie.
yeah.
I'm wondering when a good time to take a 5 minutes break would be.
Yeah, almost there. So I'm just trying to speed on to the. I just realized that this section is actually longer than I expected. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Uber MVP looks something like this, which is request a ride, trip details, and payments. Yeah. So I'm done. And this is the last section. But yeah, we should definitely take a break. My throat is also hurting. So let's take a break now, and then I'll answer questions, and then we'll finish the last part. Is that okay?
Thank you.
All right.
I'm still here. So everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really do need your help. I need a few testimonials that I know some of you have been attending these programs with us. Some have attended 5, 3, 7 sessions. We would like your testimonials, and we would like you to do it right now if you can. So I have dropped a form in the comment section. Could you please open this form? Take 2 to 3 minutes to reflect. And during this COVID-19 lockdown, how has Africa Accent STEM Hub help you when it comes to advancement of your career and skill acquisition in a manner that is hands-on, free, fast, and efficient? We would like you to write that down. The way that you think somebody else will read it and know the value that this has given to you. If this has cost you an economic improvement, maybe through the skill set you have acquired from this team, you have started a freelancing gig, or you have added it to your portfolio to make yourself more marketable for your role, please write it for us. Please help us fill this out. It is very critical that we get these testimonials from you today. So this is not something that, okay, I'm putting it back in. Somebody said, put it back up. So it's back up if you look at the comment section. So please take this 5 minutes break to help us fill this out. I'm looking at it right here to see how many of these testimonials we can get. Thank you guys for your help. We really do, we can use this. Shefumi, thank you. Is this everything?
Should it be everything? I mean, it's up to you.
No. I also think people would have questions, right? So what I wanted to also tell them is, once you fill out this form, please help us with questions that you think you would like Shefumi to help us answer. Please put it in the question box and not the comment. The question box, so it's easy for everyone to be able to read it out for you. Thank you. So we hope to resume back at 1:40. So we have 4 more minutes. Thank you all for your help. Uchi, do you want to play music for us?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
So while you fill up the form, I also wanted to say we are almost rounding up the series 2 of our Tech Masterclass. We hope to be able to get 3 more out of it. And hopefully the last session will be on the 31st of October. We are excited to be bringing to you 2 sessions from STEMOP's partner, Femex. Femex is a tech company. They're located in downtown Toronto. The grand finale of this program will be conducted by Joel. Joel is the founder of Femex. He has graciously asked to come and talk to us about how do you build a startup and how do you scale up a startup. So if you have anyone who is interested,
hackathon, is it open? Is it open? The hackathon, is it open? Is it
if
open?
so if you are interested in entrepreneurship, you are hoping to start up, or you have a business and you want to scale up that business, I will ask you to mark your calendar to come listen to Joel. This is someone who has built a multi-million-dollar company and failed 1 or 2 times before he was able to build this tech company. So come listen to him. And the last session before Joel's session will be taught by the FIMEX director of data analytics. So we're hoping to bring you 1 more session on data analytics. I feel that if there is one topic under Industry 4.0 that STEM Hub has really treated, it is data analytics. We've brought you sessions on Tableau, on Advanced Excel, on our studio, and now we'll bring you another episode of data analytics. I feel like if anyone is trying to get into data analytics, they could literally use these workshops and learn a whole lot. So we're hoping he's going to be teaching us SQL programming. So anyone who's interested in wanting to get into data analytics or learn more should plan to attend that. We're hoping that we'll use these testimonials and some of the feedback to help us prepare for Series 3, possibility of Series 3. Hopefully that will not take place this year. That will hopefully start early next year. But we want to get the information from you. How has this helped you? Because that is our motivation. Without this information, we're just teaching and not understanding whether it has economical impact, whether it makes you more competitive than you were before you met us. So please, I'm going to look through the list now to see if, so I've only gotten 1 response, guys. Please, I'm waiting patiently for your responses. We will not continue this until at least we get 6 to 7 responses. It's very critical that you two do something for us, as we have been bringing you this very quality classes for free. So please help us send your testimonials as quick as possible so that Shefumi can continue. If you have sent in your resume and your response and you have questions, please put them in the question box. And it'll be able to help us answer them. Thank you. We have 2 responses submitted. Thank you to the 2 people who have taken time to write these responses. We are waiting for a few more. Please help submit your responses. Thank you. So we're hoping to get at least 5 responses before I hand on back the class to Shefumi. We still have at 2. And yeah. Link shows so you don't need You don't need editing access, so I don't understand why that is showing. So the two people who have been able to submit, how are you able to do that? Because somebody else is saying they can't. Well, I want to know if you are filling in your um, questionnaire or there is any issue that you're encountering, please feel free to chat with us so that we can help make sure to help you get through the testimonials. Please note that your testimonials will not be shared with your name. So we will try to keep it anonymous if this is a concern. Does anyone need help? Because I still don't have more than two testimonials, and we still have 15 minutes on the call. It's either you don't want to help us or you're having a difficulty. So or it's just a little slow to fill in. I want to know which one is your own category, whether things are a little slow or you don't want to fill anything out. The sessions we provide, as you all know, they are sessions that you get to pay money for. Myself and Uchi were talking about this a few days ago, where sessions that are not even as quality as ours, people are charging good amount of money for that. So if we ask you to help us fill a form, I don't think that's too much to ask if you have been benefiting from this session. So because this helps our organization to be able to prove to funders that people need the sessions. It also helps our organizations to be able to prove to our board why they need to continue to allocate resources to plan, to look for presenters. If there's no justification for why they need to continue to allocate resources to plan these sessions, to look for presenters and to promote the sessions, then they won't be willing to support the series 3 for us. So these are some of the reasons why we need this testimonials filled out, just in case you're wondering. Okay, we have 3 people now. Thank you. We need 2 more people, and then we can get back to the questions. Thank you. Share for me. I will give you back the mic at 1:50. I promise. I'm like a police officer.
Sure, no worries. What time do we stop?
Usually the workshop goes from 2 to 3 hours, depending on how much content you have. So we're
Yeah,
already
I have a hard stop at like 2:30ish, 2:20, 2:30. So I'll just go for a little bit more and then take questions.
okay. Thank you. Guys, we have 2 more minutes. Please help us get to 5 testimonials today. Please. One more minute, and we still have 3 testimonials. If you have copied the link to fill it in after the session, we hope you do. Am I impressed? I am not, because this also shows that all the efforts we're putting in, that people could actually be on this call and not be willing to actually fill something in. So I'm sitting here and questioning the efforts that we are putting into these master classes to bring you these free skills. If people can't spend 3 minutes to write something back for us, then do we deserve a Series 3? That's the question mark here. The 2 organizations, at least on our side, we're non-for-profit. We spend our money, our resources, offering the skills that we offer to people for free. And we don't ask anything back than tweet it to your neighbor so that somebody else can benefit, or write testimonials so that we can be able to request that we want to continue the program. Maybe this is what people want. They don't want us to be able to continue, because I'm still seeing people on here and they still don't. They didn't respond to this call. Is either you don't want us to continue, or you feel like this is not good enough. Yeah, this is my rant. Thank you. For me, you can continue.
Hello everyone, I'm back. And so to Doctor's point, obviously I recognize our hard work, and even like for example, I'm doing this for free. Usually like I give talks that people pay me thousands of dollars to do. So I'm spending my day giving my time and my knowledge to you all. So I think like do your best to send, at least like spend a couple minutes giving feedback or giving a testimony. I think that goes a long way. So otherwise I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in the mission that people do. So yeah, essentially, yeah, I think like Dr. Olabamiji's rant is warranted. So please do your best. Cool. All right, let's get back into the talk. And we only have a few more slides left. I just have one more section, and I've shortened it now due to the time constraint that we have. And then I'll open it up for questions. So we'll do a Q&A till I have to leave. Awesome. So I hope you've all been enjoying the talk so far on product management and picking the right thing. I hope you found pieces of it valuable. So the last thing that I'd like to talk about is how to transition into product. And I won't spend too much time on this because I wrote an entire book on this, but I'll kind of like give you a couple highlights. So I got into product management very early in my career, and obviously having worked for several large corporations, I get asked these questions all the time, which is how did I get into product management? What are my typical day like? And any advice I had for aspiring product managers. And over the years, I had several coffee chats and calls with people asking me these same questions over and over again. And I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, I had a script at some point on like how I'd respond to these. So I didn't really think too much just to answer these questions. But I took a second to sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. So I took a second to really take a step back and really understand like what's the hype with product managers, brand management, why do people want to be a product manager? And essentially, according to the Wall Street Journal, it was the most coveted job for MBA candidates. Um, Lots of people would spend tens of thousands of dollars, if not over $100,000, to go to an MBA school so they can come out and be a product manager. And it really blew my mind that that people did that. And immediately I recognized my privilege, and I really wanted to help more people. So what I would decide to do was I decided to write a book. So this is my book called How to Product. And the way that I approach it was to solve those three questions, but in a scalable way and using other people as well. So the way I approach it is like I interviewed 40 product managers from different backgrounds, people who came from photography, cinema studies, philosophy, psychology, different backgrounds, non-technical backgrounds, majority of them. And then I picked 25 stories to tell, talking about how they were able to get their first product role, product manager role. Next, we talked about the 10 essential traits, that some of you might have, such as like communication, presentation skills to be a product manager. And then, then discuss 5 key themes on how you can transition. So I released the book in April on Product Hunt. And, thankfully it was the #1 product of the day. So I'm very, very happy for that privilege and that recognition. We're able to have over 30,000 impressions, over 10,000 site visits. Book has been downloaded over 7,000 times, and I, received over 500 consultations, as a result of the book. So it's been a very good experience, writing this and sharing this, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm here today to share my knowledge with you all. But a lot of the times when people ask me how to transition to product manager, I tell them the same thing that I told you in the beginning of this presentation, which is what product managers do, is pick a real problem, find a solution, and then ship it. That's pretty much what every single person in my book did, because in reality, you can learn by simply, like building something and validating it. By just validating ideas, you learn so much. And everyone in my book essentially worked on a small project that solved a particular problem in order for them to be considered for the job. So it's something that people did to show the hiring manager that, hey, look, I know what to do. I have the skills, because a lot of people tell me, hey, I can't get the job without the experience, but I need the experience to get the job. But hiring managers are like, hey, don't just tell me, show me something. They want you to show them something, that you built something, which is why even Uchi is a big advocate for building something, going into a hackathon and making that, possible. I'm just like getting something from it. So some tips that I wanted to share today, that if you want to be a product manager today or transition to product management, start by finding an interesting idea. I talked about several ways you can find an idea, whether it's like your personal problem or problems of others, so you know the steps of what you need to do to follow. Next, work with others with different skills. To the person who asks, hey, do I need to code? No, you don't need to know how to code. You can work with other people who can code, who can design. Your job is to influence people to be able to do the best work that they do. So it's about finding others with different skills, because you then want to then keep each other accountable. The execution piece, product management accounts for 80% of the jobs out there. And it's for you to be able to keep your team accountable, your developers and designers, to make sure like, they're working on the things that they're supposed to, so you can deliver the product on time. So that accountability is something that you need to learn early on in the process. You don't want to launch, get feedback, and iterate. Once you've gone through that cycle once, you're automatically a product manager in my eyes, and many other product hiring managers' eyes, because you're better than 95% of candidates who, read books or take just one course, theoretical course on product management, and think they can manage teams. But yeah, once you're able to get feedback and iterate and build something, that shows great initiatives. And obviously, you want to also build a network with similar-minded folks. So the fact that you're here, part of this community, is big. So you need to be able to be part of the community where other people are doing the same thing, because that would help you learn from them and learn from their mistakes, and just help each other out, give each other tips. Next, find a mentor. Mentorship is always a good idea. A lot of people have made mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes while I've built products earlier in my career. So having a mentor allows you to be able to understand that, you can solve problems and make sure you don't make the same mistake. They can guide you and say, hey, you need to go down this route, and which is a lot better. So it's important to be able to do that. And I've actually like designed and built something to be able to help with that. So one of the things that I'm working on and you'll get a sneak peek of this, is I'm working on, or I've built a course and community designed to help people gain theoretical and the practical product management experience. So it's not just about the theory and some of the stuff that I've already learned. It's hard to just like listen to all these things and put it into practice. So I've combined the two by being able to say, you can learn a lot of the theoretical aspects of things and then focus on the practical aspects where you actually work with people to bring it together. As part of the course, as the instructor, I put myself in your shoes as a product manager, an aspiring product manager who maybe has not launched anything before, and I took you through the steps on how I was able to launch a product. So I launched Wins last month, which is like an app to be able to help you celebrate your small and large wins. And everyone in the course gets to see a lot of the decisions that I made, as the instructor, as an experienced product manager, working with my team to be able to bring such an idea to life. And so you'll be able to see a lot of that. And I merged some of the theoretical aspects that I'm teaching with the practical aspects. So you not only get to like shadow a real product manager, but you also get to do it as well in the community. So what we do is we also match you with a designer and a developer so you can collaborate with them and ship a real product. So obviously that experience, like I even started this presentation with, hey, this was my experience with Pave. Now I worked with the team and developed something. And even what I developed, even though like it wasn't a success, I was able to get users and learn from that. And that was what was able to help me get into Microsoft, get into Apple, get into a lot of the big companies that I can easily get into right now. But it was because I was able to go into interviews with something to show, and I want that experience. I want people to have that same experience, whereby if they want to be product managers, they can show confidently that, hey, I know what it takes to build something, and I don't just know the theoretical stuff. I actually have the practical knowledge of what to do. So in the community, we give you that and several other benefits to be able to be part of, bringing your idea to life. So I also wanted to give you an example. We just finished our last cohort in last month in September. And to give you an example of what people built. So this is Brooke. She built she built a product called Gift Hunt. So if you're buying a gift for someone, you can actually send them clues, at different dates before the gift arrives to them to keep them engaged and guessing for what they really wanted to do. So it's an idea that she had, and she was able to build this out and build an MVP, in just 6 weeks. So it gave her the opportunity to go through all the stages of product management and embrace the PM role, and also present what her and her team accomplished in demo day. So we have demo day, which I'll talk about. But essentially, it wasn't just, hey, this is what product management is. You take a course and you learn all the theoretical aspects. It was more about, hey, this is like the practical aspects. Like you would actually do this. You would be a product manager. You write your specs. You get your specs reviewed. You work in an agile fashion. You work with the designer and the developer. And then at the end, you want to build and launch something. And we actually had some of our students who launched something in Product Hunt, which was very, very inspiring. We also have someone like Io who built a platform to be able to help Black kids, get into technology, Black high school kids. So they built a platform where, they could see mentors, see mentor profiles, learn about these different jobs that they are in tech. So you can read about data science, see what jobs are there, see how much people make. And they even started a podcast because of this product. So it was very inspiring. So, he actually says like, oh, this changed his life because he was actually able to bring something to life that he's never done before. So being able to not just build a product, but build a product that people would actually use is super huge. So it's really fun to be able to see that some people are excited to push their idea forward that they actually built out and they were forced to come up with, while working on this course. So this is a resource that I've been working on. I feel very strongly about to be able to help people get into product. And essentially, you get from idea to tangible products in 6 weeks. So week one, you learn at your own pace. You start brainstorming ideas, thinking about what do you want to bring to life, going through the product management principles that I taught you about the vision and breaking that down. And then that allows you to be able to pick something that people will actually use. Then you get your spec reviewed by mentors. So we have mentors from large, great tech companies to be able to support you through your journey. Week three, you get matched with the designer and developers. You then set up your milestones and your success. So I talked about preach. You get to also preach to your team and then get them ready for what it feels like to build that MVP. Week four, you go through the low and high fidelities, working with your designers and actually start implementing it with your design team. Week 5, you do a lot more project management. You can attend office hours and workshops. So we actually have weekly workshops for people who want to learn the tools. So someone asked me about design thinking. Someone asked me about, we have like Figma 101. Figma 101, GitHub 101, Google Analytics 101. People who are very experts in this field and have worked on building some of this technology will come in to workshops and show you how to use this tool, so you don't have to worry about learning about it for yourself. And then demo day, at the end of week 6, you actually present to judges from top tech companies, VCs, recruiters. We had several people come to recruit talent from there. We have actually one of the people who finished the program interviewing at Microsoft right now, and this is just like 1 week after demo day. So imagine coming in, not knowing anything about product. She was a mother of 2, didn't like school and, didn't think she could be in the technology industry, but now she's interviewing, at Microsoft. So, it's the opportunity to really showcase, what you want and show that you can actually build something in a very short amount of time to show that you can actually be a product manager. So we have several partners. Our partner lists are growing. This is just for the first cohorts. We have partners and mentors from Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Shopify, Twitter, to name a few. This is growing. We actually just, secured Apple as well for the next cohort. So super excited about that. And then, yeah, lots of tech companies were talking to them to try and get people who took this, program into their companies, because we want to get, as many people into tech as possible. That's one of my missions that I'm working through right now. So essentially, I call it the shipper program. It's called How to Product. It's one of the things like I've been developing, for the better half of this year. So you have available theoretical content to be able to teach you about product management, being able to also shadow me as I'm working through, bringing a product to life. So that's over 21 hours of content that you have at your disposal. We also do team matching for you. So you get like a designer and a developer. You have office hours 3 times a week where you and everyone else taking the course can go in and ask your questions about the theoretical contents and also the practical aspects, whether you're having challenges with your team. You also get, spec and design reviews. So you get a lot of like, support for your product to make sure your project is successful, you're doing the right user research, and you understand what you need to do. We have mentors from FANG companies. So FANG stands for Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. We have mentors from these companies who are here, experienced, engineering managers, designers, and developers to ensure that your project goes smoothly. We have workshops on a weekly basis. We also have guest speakers from FANG leaders. We bring product leaders, senior leaders in these companies to speak to you about their experience. And right now, we've discounted this heavily for this program this fall. So we're actually starting in October 2026, and it's about $1,500 US dollars. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and sign up. And just for this presentation, I actually gave 30% off, and that only is available today. So if you're interested, you can go to howtoproduct.io and you can use the code like AHACS when you're checking out to get 30% off of the price that I said there. If you want to be part of this program, we're starting in October 26th. That's when we have our next cohort, and that's going to run for 6 weeks up until demo day on December 12th, where you actually get to take an idea, something new, and then work with a team of developers and designers to be able to build this. I've been thinking a lot about, getting people into product management, how to get people to transition, to the point where like I decided to build something because I, feel strongly about this, and I feel like this is the best way to get people the experience, the hands-on practical experience that they need to be able to be successful. And yeah, so that's the end of my talk. I want to then open up the floor for questions, and then yeah, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Answer any question about the presentation or the course or anything that people want to ask me. Thank you so much for having me, Doctor. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any other question.
Thank you very much for today. And thank you for also giving us some discount for your program. This is very commendable. Thank you. There are a couple of questions in the question box.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I'll start reading them. Learning. So somebody's asking if to be a product manager, do you have to only focus on creating apps?
No, you don't. So thanks. That's a good question. So if you want to be a product manager, do you just have to focus on creating apps? No. You can create services, you can create a hardware product as well. So one of the companies that I work for is Ecobee, and Ecobee is actually a hardware product. So it's a smart thermostat. So there's a physical component to it, which we had product managers for, and I supported those product managers. Primarily, I focus on software. So anything from web apps to mobile apps to embedded apps. But you have product managers for devices. You have product managers for the iPhone. You have product managers for the Amazon Alexa and everything else. So it's not just apps. It's any product, any physical product. So this chair might have a product manager, but they may call it something different depending on the industry. But yeah, product, as long as you're enabling your organization to deliver value to your user, and you're working with different stakeholders, then you're a product manager. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question here. Someone is asking, can the product be a service?
Yes. So a product is a service. So for example, what I'm just showing you right now is a service, but it's a product to some degree, because we're serving people, like our customers are people, and we're giving them skills, right? So this is a service which is kind of like training or education. And there's several services that come up that people do. So there's this new company in Nigeria. It's called Eden, and it's a service, right? You get food, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, or you get groceries done. That's a service, Uber Eats is a service, because, they don't actually create the food or anything. They just get it from you. So a service is also a product, and it's a way to think about the problems people are doing. That's just like another avenue. So when you say product could mean anything, but product typically means, a way to deliver value. I think I described it in my book as a verb. I can actually put it up quickly. And this is the hard copy of my book if anyone is interested. And one of the first pages, the way that I describe product is the act of combining resources to create the most value to the end user. So if you're creating any value to the end user, then it's a product essentially. So that's like in like the first page of the book. So that's what product management, any value, whether it's service, software, hardware, it's a product. Yeah. Any next question?
Thank you. Is there a place where we can buy the book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. So you can buy the book on Amazon if you want. And all the proceeds go to charity. So every single cent on the book goes to charity. So I don't make any money on that. So, because initially it was out for free, but I discontinued the free version in favor of providing all of this for charity. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody's asking production and operation management. What is the difference between that and really a product manager?
So with production and operation management, I'm not too familiar with operation management, but essentially with product management, I think one thing that is very, very different from all other disciplines, in any industry, not just in tech, is the search for problems. Product managers are actively searching for problems that don't even necessarily exist yet, versus like I'll say with an operation manager, like I guess from the title, it seems like things are going on and you just have to manage the operations from what I'm thinking about. Whether it's like in a kind of like a manufacturing line or anything. So those are something that already exist, already have moving pieces, and it's all for you to just make sure those things move smoothly. Versus the product manager starts early on to even try and figure out like what even needs to move and where is it going, So that's how you need to think about product. Is like they make the unknown known, and then they work with all the people to actually make it possible and to get it out there. So that's how I describe product management and how that's different from anything. You really need to be able to, which is why it starts with the idea and think phase, which is why you're trying to understand what problems are there before doing anything else.
Okay, I think if I want to kind of chip in there, I feel like a product manager is needed in the beginning, ideation to implementation, pretty much. But they start from ideation, where the operation manager, it could actually take it up at the implementation stage to now say, this is how we want to distribute, this is how we want to run it, even within the company. But in the beginning, they need a product manager to help them figure out, is the idea good? Do we have the right audience? And how is the product going to look? All of those things that we've heard today. I think they're kind of just different. One is needed in the front up to the final stage, one is needed probably from the middle until the end. That's how I would describe it. Okay, I I'm still trying to see if there. Okay, based on what I see here, some of the questions that came back, you've answered them previously. So for now, I think that is all the questions that I think may need answers. Thank you to the 8 people who had filled out the survey. Thank you very much for um, your time and the effort to help us complete the survey. Uh, I don't think I'm not going to buy that book, even if the proceeds goes to charity. I think I will be trying to purchase that this weekend to at least have a read. Thank you so much for this presentation today. Thank you for your
More
time.
to be
Thank you
here.
for sharing your knowledge with us.
No worries. And always anyone you can reach out to me by email. I'm very, very accessible. My email is shifumi at howtoproduct.io. If anyone has additional questions or comments about the book or the course, happy to answer anyone's questions. So it's been a pleasure and thank you so much for having me.
I just want to piggyback to what Steven said, because there's a lot of
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for all the efforts and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Team, thank you for your consistency, for coming on here with us every weekend. Today is a very crucial day for those people who are back home in Africa. There are a lot of unrest in 2 countries in Africa today. But you still made out time to come in to learn from Shefumi and from Africa Hacks and STEM Hub. Please follow us on social media so we can keep you abreast about what is coming up in the following weeks. We appreciate your support, Shefumi. And any other thing from Africa Hacks side before we close today? Uchi, anything from your side?
He said no, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. And this would be goodbye. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.